Welcome to OOTO TV, the out-of-the-office investigation from our past into the future of personal health and agriculture production. This time we're digging deep into a topic that affects every single person listening: regenerative agriculture and the profound impact of soil health practices.
That's right, Franklin. And we are expanding the scope far beyond just simple cultivation techniques here.
Much further.
Our sources challenge us to investigate the fundamental connection between soil vitality, the life beneath our feet, and the actual nutritional density of the food we eat.
And critically, how that influences human health outcomes. It's a massive topic, Washington.
It is.
Our mission today is, well, it's complex. First, we need to nail down the core principles that define regenerative agriculture, understanding why these old ways are suddenly the future.
Then we'll track that biological highway, the one that links healthy soil directly to nutrient-dense food and ultimately to our recovery and longevity.
And finally, we have to analyze the huge economic and political roadblocks.
The big ones.
The ones standing in the way of scaling these radically traditional methods against the prevailing industrial food system that feeds most of the world today.
Okay, so let's start with the basics.
Let's get to the fundamentals. Regenerative agriculture is, it's inherently a holistic system, but the term itself is fluid.
It's not set in stone.
Not at all. I was looking at a review from 2020 that looked at hundreds of articles and found the definitions are still split. Are we focusing on the process, what the farmer is doing, or the outcome like measurable increases in carbon?
Right. But regardless of the technical definition, the underlying philosophy is about active, restorative action.
It is.
And that leads us to the core differentiators, Franklin. What are key elements for regenerative agriculture and soil health practices that distinguish this approach from conventional farming, which so often operates in, a reductive linear model?
The difference is striking, Washington. The core of it boils down to four, I'd say, non-negotiable principles for healthy soil management.
Okay.
The first is to minimize disturbance.
So reduced or no tillage?
Exactly. This is a massive shift from conventional practices, and it's essential because it preserves the crucial soil structure.
It maintains the habitat.
It maintains that subterranean highway network for microbial life. Tillage is fundamentally disruptive to that entire ecosystem.
You're protecting the infrastructure of the soil.
Oh.
So what about keeping the ground covered?
That's number two. You want to maximize soil cover using residues and living mulches to act as the soil's armor against wind and water erosion.
Makes sense.
Third, and this is perhaps the most critical ecologically, is to maximize the presence of living roots year-round. You never, ever want bare ground.
So if the sun is shining,
the plant should be photosynthesizing, pulling carbon dioxide from the air and pumping those liquid carbon sugars down to feed the soil biology.
Those root exudates, the sugars and organic acids released by the roots, they are the engine that drives the whole system. What's the final piece?
That's maximize biodiversity. And not just plant diversity, but critically animal and microbial diversity too.
The whole picture.
You cannot regenerate soil if you are relying on a single vulnerable crop in a barren field. It's an approach that, it attempts to mimic nature rather than simplify it into a chemical equation.
And that's where specific practices translate these principles into action. Take cover crops, for example.
A great example.
These are plants grown during the off-season. They prevent erosion, yes, but their biological function is deeper. They're facilitating year-round carbon sequestration by continuously feeding sugars, proteins, and organic acids to those carbon-limited soil microbes.
The mycorrhizal fungi and bacteria.
Exactly. They essentially keep the soil ecosystem awake and working through the winter.
It's keeping that microbial community perpetually nourished. It completely changes the soil's vitality.
Absolutely. Then we have crop rotation, which is a time-tested technique.
And an ancient one.
Alternating crops helps balance nutrient demands. Legumes replenish nitrogen for crops like corn, and this diversity breaks up pest and disease cycles.
Which means less need for chemical intervention.
Dramatically reducing the requirement for it. And when you intensify that diversity, you get intercropping.
Right. Planting complementary crops together.
Things like beans that climb with grains. It creates this synergistic environment. Diverse root systems improve soil aeration, and the mixed planting provides natural pest control simply by breaking up those vast monocultures.
And we also have to talk about fallowing.
Managed fallowing, yes. It provides necessary rest, but does so productively. This is a sharp contrast to the long and clean industrial fallows that relied on agrochemicals or deep tillage to essentially sterilize the ground.
Managed practices use cover crops or livestock during these rest periods to prevent erosion, add organic matter, and allow microorganisms and minerals to actively regenerate.
This isn't just theory, Washington. We have phenomenal success stories. I love the story of White Oak Pastures in Georgia. Oh, that one's incredible.
The founder completely shifted from modern industrial methods, mechanized tilling, synthetic fertilizers, back to these radically traditional methods.
And the result?
They converted their land from having a barely functioning 0.5% organic matter to a lush, water-retentive 5%.
That's a tenfold increase.
A tenfold increase, fundamentally transforming the soil from what was described as a dead mineral medium to a living organic medium. That is the creation of true ecological wealth.
You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bulow. That incredible gain in organic matter at White Oak Pastures is the perfect illustration of why soil health translates directly to human health.
It's the perfect bridge.
The vitality of the soil, its structure, its mineral balance, its microbial biodiversity is fundamental to determining the nutritional and chemical properties of the crops grown in it.
It's unavoidable.
Regenerative agriculture and soil health practices suggest our bodies and each organ and muscle depends on health agricultural practices for good for health.
And the scientific literature strongly supports this concept, particularly when you focus on regenerative organic agriculture, or ROA.
The evidence is there.
We see clear, measurable nutritional gains. Studies report significant increases in vital micronutrients in ROA crops like leafy greens, grapes, and carrots.
And we're talking about essential elements that are so often deficient in modern diets.
Exactly. Vitamin C, zinc, iron, magnesium, phosphorus.
Critically, Franklin, these ROA systems simultaneously show significant reductions in harmful residues.
That's just as important.
We are talking about less exposure to nitrates and dramatically reduced pesticide residues. So you aren't just getting more of the good stuff, you are actively reducing the toxic load on your system.
And even the basic building blocks, the macronutrients, improve. Enhanced microbial activity supports better nitrogen mineralization.
Which means higher protein synthesis in the crops.
Yes. Plus, the sheer richness of the organic matter naturally leads to higher fiber content in whole grains and produce.
Another major deficiency in industrialized diets is just a comprehensive nutritional upgrade across the board.
It is.
And let's emphasize the role of bioactive molecules. This is where the plant's own defense system kicks in.
Right, the antioxidants.
ROA and organic systems promote the plant's natural synthesis of these crucial antioxidant compounds, polyphenols, flavonoids, carotenoids. This happens because the improved soil microbial activity and nutrient availability mean the plant is healthy.
It has the energy.
It can focus its energy on producing these protective compounds, which then benefit us when we consume them.
It's a virtuous cycle.
Given these nutritional and chemical enhancements, Franklin, how specifically can regenerative agriculture and soil health practices affect our mental and physical health in measurable ways?
The implications are vast, Washington. When you look at the scientific findings, the connection becomes undeniable. Exposure to regenerative agriculture and soil health practices is a critical element to our health, recovery, and illness reduction.
We're optimizing the inputs.
We are optimizing the fundamental inputs of life. By giving the body superior building blocks and reducing the toxic burden from chemical residues, regenerative agriculture and soil health practices stimulates a healthy environment for cellular growth and success.
So we're not just talking about avoiding deficiency, we're talking about achieving optimal function at the cellular level.
Exactly. And the data shows regenerative agriculture and soil health practices can be linked to improved mood, memory, thinking, and increased longevity.
That's a huge claim.
But it's backed up. Consuming these nutrient-dense foods, rich in antioxidants, minerals, clean protein, has been associated with a modestly decreased risk of serious chronic conditions, including cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and overall all-cause mortality.
It's a direct pathway from soil wealth to human vitality.
It is.
And that holistic view is key. ROA eliminates things like GMOs, antibiotics, pesticides, and mineral fertilizers to enhance that indigenous soil activity and balance nutrients, ultimately leading to environmentally friendly products free of chemical elements not naturally present in food.
It's clean in, clean out.
It is.
Now, as inspiring as that holistic nutritional vision is, we have to pivot
Through the hard part.
to the harsh realities of implementation, the financial viability of scaling RA. Well, it often faces stiff resistance and practical complexities that challenge the ideal narrative. We need to talk about the friction points.
That's vital. We have to consider the conflicting research findings because a single regenerative practice is rarely a universal panacea.
No silver bullet.
For instance, some research analyzing no-till versus cultivated systems sometimes found no net carbon sequestration when sampling depth was increased to 2 feet.
That seems completely counterintuitive. No-till is supposed to lock carbon in. What was the critical missing piece there?
It was frequency and integration. The net carbon gain only occurred if cropping frequency was increased through double cropping or by adding cover crops.
So it's not enough to just stop one bad practice.
It highlights that simply stopping tillage is not enough. It has to be combined with constant root presence to continuously feed the soil's carbon sink.
And grazing studies show a similar need for nuance management. An Oklahoma State University study on adaptive multi-paddock rotational grazing compared to continuous grazing.
AMP grazing, right?
It found that individual season-long yearling gains were actually 11% to 20% lower under the AMP rotation.
A potential economic penalty, at least in the short term.
It is. And that economic factor is crucial. Rotational stocking did not provide net returns equal to continuous stocking at a conservative rate unless that weight gain decline could be somehow mitigated.
So what was the key takeaway?
The key takeaway from that study was that the stocking rate, the density of animals, had the greatest impact on forage production, far more than the specific duration of the grazing or rest periods.
So these studies tell us that context, integration, and precise management are essential for making regenerative practices work financially.
Which leads us to the biggest challenge of all. Washington, can regenerative agriculture and soil health practices truly be scaled and made profitable enough to replace the current industrial model which feeds most of the world?
You're listening to OOTO TV with research by author Paul Bielo. The problem is inherently systemic, Franklin. Industrial agriculture is a linear model focused purely on efficiency and removing every possible cost from the food production chain.
But as our sources warned, this linear focus merely shifted the costs somewhere else.
And that shift is the definition of externalities, isn't it? Costs that are not reflected in the price tag at the grocery store.
Not at all.
Exactly. This unaccounted cost includes vast chemical runoff that has devastated multi-generational oystering and fishing industries in places like the Gulf of Mexico. It includes massive species loss.
And the health costs are staggering.
Staggering. 80% of Americans test positive for glyphosate, and our sources point out that cancer rates attributed to agricultural use areas are comparable to all cancer rates linked to smoking.
That's a shocking comparison.
It is. And this is the devastating hidden true cost of cheap food.
And this hidden cost enables the risk of the shallow regen agenda, or what we now call greenwashing.
Yes. When massive multinational food companies like PepsiCo, Nestle, General Mills, and even Bayer start using the aspirational language of regenerative agriculture,
while simultaneously continuing the heavy reliance on synthetic fertilizers and major pollutants,
the movement risks being co-opted and diluted. It loses all its meaning.
So what's the solution?
The solution framework, therefore, has to bypass those centralized powers. Real change, according to the leaders in this space, won't come from big ag or lobbying.
So where does it come from?
It has to come from consumers fundamentally understanding the damage caused by eating super cheap industrial food.
So instead of waiting for a single tidal wave of global policy change, the focus needs to be on building local bubbles.
Exactly. Prioritizing geographically localized food production to build wealth and equitable access in communities rather than maximizing linear, centralized corporate profits.
Stepping back to synthesize everything we've discussed, regenerative agriculture is ultimately a change in fundamental mindset.
It really is.
It's a return to the cyclical systems of nature, based on Sir Albert Howard's concept of the law of return, the essential principle of putting back more in than what you take out.
Which directly opposes the reductive linear manufacturing model that was mistakenly applied to agriculture post-World War II.
It's a total paradigm shift.
And fundamentally, Franklin, regenerative agriculture is an absolute imperative for human health. It provides nutrient-dense food, enhanced with vital micronutrients and protective bioactive compounds,
while reducing the bad stuff.
While simultaneously reducing the toxic exposure from chemical residues. This focus on diversification and integration, like multi-species grazing, which mimics natural systems, is crucial because it actively builds soil wealth.
So for you, our listener, the movement ultimately relies on local action and consumer support. We need to find a farmer whose land management practices resonate with us, communicate with them, and actively support the creation of local markets.
The white oak pastures in every county vision.
That's it. Recognizing that this grassroots effort is the only reliable way to create true, long-term ecological wealth that benefits both the land and our health.
And that leads to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with.
Go ahead.
The single most important change consumers can make is to stop operating this profoundly cyclical system, the planet's ability to generate life in a linear, extractive way, and instead demand an honest accounting of the true cost of food.